everyone, I'm Dave Thomas, and today I'm building the Red Giant model rocket. This is made by MPC and is part of their Planetary Transit series, which also includes the Lunar Shuttle and the Galactic Training Ship, and videos for those two models are available on my channel as well. The really nice thing about this series of models is that they're all pre-colored. So all you have to do is put this together. You don't have to do any finishing. They're pre-finished. They're in really nice patterns and colors. And so you can go from box to launch field in about 2 hours, depending on how quickly your glue dries. So we'll go ahead and open this up. Alright, let's find our instructions here. Okay, so be careful when you get the instructions out, as there's often stuff hidden in them. Okay, so we've got some decals and our parachute there. And then we'll come to our main parts list here. So we have the lower body tube, the fin can, which was attached, and our transition or tube connector here. So always check inside the body tubes. The upper body tube, nose cone, motor retainer, and then a small parts package that contains the fins, the shroud lines, the shock cord, attachments for the shroud lines, and the launch legs. Okay, so check here quick. Yep, looks like we have everything. Oh, it even includes the shock cord mount that's already cut out for us there. So I'm going to move most of this out of the way and then we'll get started on the build. Our first task is to mount the fin can onto the lower body tube. And if we go back and look at the cover photo here, okay, so this part here with the zigzag lines there, that's going to be the aft end. And just to make sure I don't forget about that and put it on backwards later, I'm going to write aft on the inside. Okay, now the fin can is actually also the motor mount. We don't have to add anything to it. This is the motor retainer, and it's got a bayonet mount here, so you just put that in through the slots and give it a turn. Aha! Okay, we may have a problem here. Usually this just means that there's a slight difference in tolerances here. There it goes. Okay, so once you get it to move, just kind of move it back and forth a few times to let it wear in. Alright, I'm going to leave this off while we're building, just in case I end up trying to glue it together, and I don't want that. So the first thing we're going to do is take the fin can and put that in here onto the aft body tube. Mine's kind of loose. That's alright. Okay, now this has 3 fins, and my launch lugs, when I put them on, I'm going to put them along this seam here in the body wrap. And so I'm just going to use that to orient myself. Okay, and I'm going to want to have my launch lugs and launch rod, when it's attached, pass between 2 of the fins here. So I'm just kind of dry fitting and making sure everything's going to go together there. Alright, the instructions recommend using a tube type plastic cement, and that'll work fine. I prefer to use a gel type super glue when I'm gluing dissimilar parts like plastic to cardboard. And the other thing I'm going to do, and this is optional, I'm just going to roughen this up on the shoulder here with some sandpaper. I think I'm using 150 here. It doesn't really matter. Anything between about 80 and 220 will work. But this is just giving a better gluing surface. So the glue has something non-glossy to attach. Okay. Now be warned, usually when you do something like this, the glue grabs a lot quicker, so you want to make sure that you're in where you want to be and in the right position. Alright, using whichever cement you want on this. go ahead and just run a bead of glue right along the inside there. Doesn't need to go all the way to the edge, but you want it close because this is going to get pushed up ahead. Alright, now once more let me find the seam, okay, and put it between two of the fins. Just going to move it back and forth to seat it, and there it has grabbed already. Alright, I'm going to let this dry for just a couple of minutes before we start handling it again to go on to the rest. While the glue is drying on the lower body tube, we can go ahead and work on the upper body tube. So the transition piece here is going to go in the aft end of the lower body tube, and this one, since it has writing on it, is easy to orient. Okay, this is going to go in here, and this is really snug. Okay, so in this case we're definitely going to need to use some sandpaper here. Now don't sand this part that's actually got the pattern on it. We just want to sand the shoulder. There we go. Okay. Oop, caught a little bit of the ribs there. Alright, so we're going to put this together just like we did the fin can. And since I did have to sand that, I can guarantee that's going to grab really quickly. So make sure you've got this positioned the way you want it. Okay, once again here we'll just run a bead just inside. Alright, now there's no particular orientation to this one, so I'm just going to pop that in there and up. Okay, give it a little bit of a turn to seat it, and that one also can be set aside for just a few minutes and let that cure. Next we're ready to put on the launch lugs, and so according to the instructions, the first launch lug is going to go at 160 millimeters. And then the second one at 110 millimeters beyond that, okay, or the equivalent inches there. Now they're measuring from the motor retainer, so I'm going to go ahead and put that back on. Alright, so where's my seam? So this is the seam I want to use. Okay, so here I'm just going to make a little mark, 160 millimeters, or be 16 centimeters there. Actually, I want that closer to the seam. Going to go right there, and then 11 centimeters beyond that will put us at 27. It's going to be way up here. Alright. And then taking my launch lugs here, I can just give an idea of where this is going to go. So this launch lug is going to go almost flush with the forward end. And then this one's going to go right here. Now this part is also optional, but your launch lugs will stay on better. I'm just going to take some sandpaper here and just roughen that surface just a little bit to give the glue a better grip. Do this for each of them. And then on my launch lugs, they've actually got a seam on them as well. And I'm going to just give a couple of strokes of the sandpaper there as well, and that will also help glue stick. Alright, now the instructions show putting the launch lugs on first and then the fins. I'm going to do it in reverse order. So I'm just going to set that aside for a moment. Okay, now they show applying tube type plastic cement right along the fin attachment here and then sliding the fin in. And after building several of this type of rocket, I found that it's really easy to have that grab where you don't want it to. So you only get your fin in maybe halfway and then the glue sets. So I'm going to show you a different way to do this. You will need some brush-on type plastic cement like this. Doesn't matter which brand, whichever you like. But you want the really runny stuff here. So the first thing we're going to do is test fit the fins. So just go ahead and slide them in there. Alright, that one got really stiff as we get up there. And the fin aft edge should be flush with the aft edge of the fin connector there. And not be extending down over the engine retainer. Okay, it's really, there we go. Yeah, see, so if I had done that with glue already in there, it probably would have got stuck. Come back. Alright, I'll do the third fin here. And the other thing is, I'm not sure this is polystyrene, which is what plastic model cement is meant for. It's maybe something else. Alright, so now what I'm going to do is once I've got the fins where I want them, and I'm going to take my motor retainer back off, because this is a thing that could end up accidentally gluing it on. Take the brush on cement here, and just run it along the edge between the fin socket there and the fin. And this will be drawn down by capillary action and then set. Okay, now if you get glue smeared somewhere you don't want it, don't try and wipe it off, just let it dry. This glue becomes very transparent and it's really not that noticeable once it dries. Now I'm going to switch to a white glue, and this is actually a white wood glue, just general purpose white glue works as well. I don't recommend using a yellow glue for the launch lugs because it will be noticeable. Alright, so again we have our scratched area there and there. We're going to take the launch lugs put a thin, uniform amount of glue on there. Okay, and then we're just going to put that right on the line. Okay, and then looking down upon it, make sure it's parallel with the line and centered on it. And then you can look down the rocket, again using the line as a guide, making sure that's straight. Okay, and then do the same thing with the other launch lug here. Okay, once more, looking down. Make sure that it's straight, and then I'm going to look down the length of the rocket and use like a gun sight here. So we want both of the launch lugs in line with each other and in line with the seam there, and that looks good. So I'm going to let this thing dry for about 5 to 10 minutes so the launch lugs don't fall off, and then we will come back. While we're waiting for the launch lugs to dry, we can go ahead and install the shock cord and set up the parachute. So first just take the shock cord mount here, cut it out. Okay, now I'm going to mark this just to make it easier to reference. We got 1, 2, and 3. Okay, our shock cord is not very long, but we'll go with it. Okay, so here I'm going to take wood glue or white wood glue and run a fairly heavy bead down here. Because in this one we want a sandwich of glue and paper and shock cord without any air in it. Okay, I'm going to run this at a diagonal so that it doesn't fold directly on top of itself. And now I'm going to fold the 1 over onto the 2. Okay, and just go ahead and squish that in there. If you get excess glue, you can just wipe that off. Okay, and then we're going to take the 2 and fold it over onto the 3. Okay, and again, go ahead and squish this around so we get a good lamination of glue and paper, and then impart a curve to it like this. And then on the convex face of our curved mount now, we're going to add some more glue. Okay, and get this nice and uniform all around. And then this is going to go in the upper body tube. And this needs to go down at least 40 millimeters, or about 1 5/8 inches. I just say get it down as far as you can. So if you have long skinny fingers, that's even better. Alright, I'm going to turn this over so the glue is against the tube there. Let me see if I can show you that. Alright, so it looks like that. And now I'm going to hold that part against my hand and then squish down the mount so that I'm pressing it between my finger and the body tube in my hand. Just get all the air out of that and get it as flat against the inside as possible. Okay, so now if we look down there, I can barely see it there. I've got a little bit of a glue blob in there, so I'm going to use an applicator here to smooth that out. Okay, and so we can just let that glue dry for a little while. Okay, for our nose cone, we're going to need to clean out the little bit of plastic flash inside the eyelet. If yours has it, sometimes it already falls off during shipment. Alright, just carefully cut around that. Don't cut through the eyelet itself. So remove that. Okay, now this kit is not meant to be painted. If you decide that you just have to paint it though, this nose cone feels like it's made out of polyethylene. And polyethylene and paint don't like to stick together. So if you do want to paint this, you're going to need to use some fine sanding paper and lightly roughen the surface here. And then I would recommend using what's called a universal bonding primer, and that will give you a better grip of the paint between the plastic and your final coating. As I said, this is actually meant to go just as is. Still waiting for the glue to dry, so we can go ahead and cut out the parachute here. And this is easily done with scissors. Now this is a really big parachute, and a little bit later we'll talk about changing this out, especially on windy days. But next we need our shroud lines here from the small parts package, and there should be 3 of them pre-cut. Kind of tease those apart. And now I'm going to take the ends, one end or another, and I'm going to make sure they're all lined up here at one end. Okay, and I'm just going to pull through the whole length here. Okay, and they should also meet up here. Looks like they're just a little bit different. So I'm just going to take all of my ends, put them together, and just trim those off. Okay, now we'll need the adhesive buttons, which are these things here. They're actually little clear stick-on decals. And go ahead and separate the shroud lines from each other now. Alright, so just find the end of one of them, and then you'll take the adhesive decals here, peel one off. Okay, and you're basically going to try and run this around the inside of the circle, about like that. Okay, it doesn't have to be perfect. And then you're going to go over to one of the corners here and just put that right on there. Okay, and just squash it down good. Okay, and then the other end of that shroud line is going to go to an adjacent corner. Okay, well, that's not pretty, but it'll work. Okay, and then just continue around with the other 2 shroud lines. And I'm going to do that off camera. Now I have all of the shroud lines attached. I'm going to flip this over here and gather them all together. Okay, and I'm going to loop those over one finger here. Okay, and now I'm going to grab the center of the parachute sheet here with my other hand. Okay, and if I pull taut on the lines, all of the corners there should come together at about the same level, and they do. Okay, and then I should have the same tautness over here, so there shouldn't be any very loose or very tight shroud lines compared to the other. Now you can do this one of 2 ways. The instructions call for placing the loops through the eyelet here, and then you can either pass the entire parachute through that loop and pull it down taut, or you can pass the nose cone through the loops and pull it taut. I'm not going to do either one of those. Alright, so by now hopefully you've seen some of my other videos, and you'll know that I don't like to do permanently tied on parachutes here. So I'm going to reposition my parachute shroud lines. And then I'm going to get a snap swivel like these. And you can get these in the fishing section of hardware and sporting goods and department stores. The size doesn't matter a whole lot as long as the snap part can go through the eyelet without binding. Okay, so taking my loops here, and I've never let go of them compared to each other there, so they can't slip back and forth. If yours does, just go ahead and go back and remeasure them together. But I'm going to gather all the loops into a little point here. I'm going to stick it through the swivel side of the snap swivel. Okay, still holding the shroud lines back here. I'm going to open up that loop, and I'm going to pass the entire snap swivel through the loops, and then pull the loops down, and then we're going to pull them taut. And then I'm going to go back to my parachute here and make sure that everything's still lined up. And it is. If you ended up getting it a little lopsided or your shroud lines aren't where they should be, just loosen this up and try again. Once you do have it where you want it, then take a little dot of white glue or wood glue and just put it right on that knot. And that'll just help keep it from coming loose and changing the relative lengths of your shroud line again. So now when we're ready to attach it, we can just open up the snap part, pop that on there, and then close it up again. And this gives us a couple of advantages. One is the swivel itself will turn if the parachute is spinning a bit, okay, which tends to wind up the shroud lines. Now, it doesn't take all of the winds out, but it does loosen it a bit. But the other one is that we can take the parachute off easily. Some people don't like to store their parachutes in their rockets to help keep them from permanently crumpling. Or, as I mentioned, this is a really big parachute for a fairly light rocket. And so if you've got a windier day, you might want to take this off and replace it with a 12-inch parachute. And that's just as easy as popping that off like that, having your 12-inch parachute also with a snap swivel, popping it on there, and you're ready to go once more. Now we're at the stage of putting everything together. You can tell there my glue is not quite cured there, but it should be good enough that we can handle it. And now I'm going to use the white glue again to add some fillets for extra strength. And here it's best to use white glue instead of yellow glue so that you don't have it looking yellow. This glue, when it dries, is almost transparent. And I just take a finger and wipe off the excess, kind of streamline it in there. Okay. Now we can handle this carefully, but until that glue at least skins over, you don't want to put this in a vertical position for very long or it may run downward. Alright, now we're going to glue the adapter into the lower body tube. And here again we'll just first of all friction fit that, make sure it works. Alright, now when this does glue together, you'll probably want to align the black line there, which is on both sides. Okay, but now I just said we don't want to put this vertical. When we put this on, we are going to want it to be vertical, at least long enough for the glue to cure. So for the moment, I'm going to go ahead and let my launch lugs, again, at least skin over so that they're not going to flow, and I'll come back in a few minutes and we'll put this together. Now that the fillets have had a chance to partially dry and skin over, we can go ahead and continue with the insertion of our adapter into the body tube. Okay, and once again, I recommend using the gel type super glue, although you can use tube type plastic cement as well. Okay, and once more we're just going to do this right inside. Okay, and if you want, again, you can go ahead and just roughen this up a little bit. It doesn't take much. Now we do want to line up the black lines here. So as I put this in, I'm going to sight down the rocket. Put that in and just give it a little twist, but making sure we don't lock too quickly. And I just realized that these lines are not evenly spaced on the other side. So there actually is a proper way, this should line up around the other side. Right? And in my case, I cannot fix it. It is already bound there. That's okay. Okay, then we'll come back down here to our shock cord, and we'll go ahead and tie this on. Just use a couple of half hitches or a double knot. Alright, cinch that down really good and tight, pulling from multiple directions here. And then if you have more than about 6 millimeters or 1/4 of an inch here, go ahead and cut that back, but not all the way to the knot. And then, like we did on our shroud lines, go ahead and just put a little dot of glue right here. Okay, and again, use white glue or wood glue for this. The other glues will deteriorate the elastic. We don't want that. And then the final step is to go ahead now, and if you haven't tied your parachute to the nose cone already, go ahead and clip on your snap swivel. Okay, and structurally this is ready to go. I'm not going to pack it at this moment because we still have glue that's possibly wet inside here. Okay, so the whole rocket goes together about 45 minutes to an hour, but what you're going to have a waiting process for is for the white or wood glue that you use to dry. And I don't recommend packing this or launching it, especially until that shock cord mount is completely dry. With that, I hope you had fun building this rocket. Have a great launch and a safe recovery, and please stay tuned for more of my videos.